Hi, my name is Laura Cox, and I am Shield Healthcare's Ostomy Lifestyle Specialist. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Joy Hooper. Joy is a CWOCN, OMS, and WCC. She is also the creator of the anatomical apron. Today, she's going to be showing us a few diversions.
First, let me explain how the food travels through the GI tract. We chew our food and it goes down our esophagus and into our stomach. When it gets in the stomach, it's held, it's churned, and then it's slowly released to go into the small intestine. Now, as the chewed up food is going into the small intestine, the pancreas, the gallbladder, and the liver all add in additional digestive enzymes to help break that food down. That steak, those greens, they just get pulverized with those digestive enzymes as well as that muscular action, moving that chewed up food through the GI tract. Now, as it's getting pulverized, the walls of the small intestine are absorbing those vitamins and nutrients and taking it to use for fuel for our bodies. So it's like the small intestine eats for us. All right, so after the food has traveled through the small intestine, it's going to go into the large intestine. And your large intestine, or your colon, it drinks for us. Because as that chewed up food is traveling around through the colon, it's reabsorbing that liquid through it. So it gets thicker and thicker and thicker with the more colon that you've got. So it finally exits our body out of our anus. Now, a common ostomy procedure is the colostomy. And to do a colostomy, what the surgeon is going to do is separate the colon just like that. Now, if it's a low rectal cancer or an anal cancer, they may need to even remove the rectum or the anus and close that part of the body up. But if they don't, they're going to leave it intact, and this is going to be known as the Hartmann's pouch. Now, getting back to the colostomy, surgeon's got to do something because you've got food going in here and stool coming out here. So what the surgeon will do is make a small incision in the front of the abdomen, take the open end of the GI tract, pull it through, fold it over, and create what's known as the stoma. And this is where the person's stool is going to exit their body, and they're going to wear a pouch over it to collect that stool. So that is a colostomy. Now, the next diversion I want to explain is called an ileostomy because it's going to occur in the ileum section, the final section of the small intestine. And with this procedure, what the surgeon does is separate the small intestine from the large intestine, and then they're going to do that same stoma procedure where they make the small incision in the front of the abdomen, take the open end of the GI tract, pull it through, and create that stoma. Now you notice with this one, the stoma is smaller with that, and that's because the diameter of the small intestine is so much smaller than the colon. Now, a couple things that you want to notice with this stoma right here. Notice that this is coming right off of the small intestine. And you remember those digestive enzymes we talked about, breaking that steak down and those greens? Well, when those digestive enzymes get here on the skin, all they know how to do is digest. And so when they're on the skin, they are digesting that skin. Another thing that's important with the ileostomy, the person doesn't have their colon drinking for them anymore. The colon was either removed or closed up, so they don't have that colon drinking for them. And what's going to happen is their stomach and small intestine have to pick up the slack for drinking that, drinking for the body. So what we need that person with an ileostomy to do is drink extra liquids to avoid dehydration. But that is an ileostomy. Now, the next diversion that I want to show is actually going to be a form of either the colostomy or the ileostomy. It's just a different way of doing it, okay? Because with the stomas that I showed before, what we used was the end of the GI tract and we folded it over like a cuff to create that stoma. But what you're going to see with a loop stoma, what the surgeon is going to do is pull a loop of the GI tract out through the abdominal wall, similar to this, just like this, and then to keep it out there, what the surgeon is going to do is use some type of stabilization rod to hold it in place. Sometimes they use a catheter, but something to hold this in place and keep that loop from sliding back into the body. Now, let me show you with this piece right here what's happening. So they pull this loop of the GI tract through, put the rod behind it, and the way that they open it up is the surgeon's going to split it across the top and fold it back. Now notice what happens if I were to split this and then fold it back. You're going to have a stoma that has openings going into either side of the GI tract, because remember I just pulled a loop of it through. Well, sometimes the stomas can look like this, or sometimes they can come out a little bit more and look like two stomas side by side, or even sometimes they look like that. So a loop stoma can appear many different ways. It's just important to know that it's got two different openings right there. It's still a great functioning stoma, just like the end stoma is. Now back to this rod. Remember, the rod was put in place to keep that loop of GI tract from slipping back into the abdomen. Well, after about 7 to 14 days, the surgeon's simply going to remove that rod, and then this loop stoma will function just fine without it. Now, Laura, there's another fecal diversion that's sometimes seldom seen, but it's called a double barrel. And with a double barrel, the surgeon separates the GI tract, and just like the name implies, there's going to be two stomas. So you're going to have a stoma over on the left side of the body. It's created the same way. The surgeon brings the open end of the GI tract out, folds it over, and creates a stoma. But then you're also going to have a stoma over on the right side of the body as well. Created the same way. Brought out, folded over, and sewn down. But just as I said, you've got these two stomas. So one of these is going to be discharging the stool, and the other one, remember the mucus we talked about? It can discharge mucus out of it. And that's your double barrel. Now what I want to explain is a urostomy, which the medical term for this one that's usually done is called an ileal conduit. Now let's look at how the urinary tract normally is in the body. And let me first say, the kidneys and the ureters, they're not normally on the front of the GI tract, they're behind it, but it's just easier for me to explain this by putting the kidneys right here on the front. So you've got your kidneys, your ureter, your bladder, and your urethra. Now, if this was an actual female urethra, it would be a lot shorter, and if it was a male urethra, we would like it to be much, much longer. But if someone has, say, bladder cancer, what they're going to probably need to do is remove the bladder. Now, the options are, when the bladder is removed, they can bring the ureters out and create ureterostomies. But the ureters are so small in diameter, and their stomas tend to stenose, which means get smaller. It's just really not, a good part of the body to make a stoma out of. Sometimes they'll even attach one ureter to another ureter, bring just one out, and make a ureterostomy. But the most common form that they do with an ileostomy, like I said, it's the ileal conduit. And it gets that name because it actually utilizes the ileum section of that small intestine. So the surgeons take a piece of the ileum right here, close one end of it, and then they implant the ureters into this little section of ileum, creating a conduit, a way for the urine to exit the body. And they're going to do that same stoma procedure as they bring that piece of ileum out. They're going to fold it over and suture it down to the body and create that stoma. Now, something that's very important to understand about the GI tract, especially when you're talking about a urostomy, the GI tract secretes a lot of mucus. In the small intestine, that's literally keeping those digestive enzymes inside the anatomy, but it also keeps everything flowing through the GI tract. Well, when they remove this little section of ileum from the GI tract and put it in the urinary tract, this little piece of ileum doesn't know and doesn't care that it's not part of the GI tract anymore, and it continues to secrete that mucus. And so the person with the urostomy is going to see that mucus in their pouch. It can look like little worms, just little strips of mucus in there, and it can really alarm some people. But it's common, it's fine, that GI tract is just functioning and doing what it knows how to do. So that is an ileal conduit, the most common urostomy that's pretty much created.